right, we're going to go ahead and start. Thanks, ma'am. Okay, we'll go ahead and start with a prayer by Anthony Jenkins.
Our Father in heaven, we're grateful for the opportunity to gather together as a planning commission and to discuss the needs of this city. Please guide us and please watch over this city and help us to serve its residents well. And we say this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. All right, we'll go ahead and, actually, do I need a motion to go into open session? I should know that, but I don't. Okay, we're going to do an open session, so if there's anybody who would like to come speak or say anything, come to the microphone, state your name, where you are. If not, we'll go ahead and close that. We do have some minutes for review and approval tonight. Did anyone have any comments about that? I did see one thing. Can't I find it? I just noticed, McKenna, did you type them up? Mm-hmm. I just noticed, I'm sorry, I can't find it on my computer right now, but when I read through, I noticed that sometimes it said Commissioner Sullivan. It's a couple of times, so maybe just go back and make sure people are, I don't know if it was the commissioner part that was wrong or if it was not him that spoke. Might have been somebody else, so. Oh, maybe it was Shan. Oh, I was thinking it was Sullivan. Love, yeah.
Yeah,
That makes sense then. Okay. You can see how I would be confused on that. Okay, if anyone doesn't have any comments about those minutes, do we have any motions?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as stated.
I second.
Great. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. There, I found him. Okay. Great. All right, we'll move on to our sign standard waiver.
Well, I think when I spoke with Steve, I think he wanted to talk with the
We
commission.
could-
So we could do the
We could go ahead and do the other
appointments.
part
Would that be all
first.
right, Liz? We just do like which one was that? This one. Yeah, 5-2. Would that be all right if
Yeah,
we move the 5-2?
yeah, that's fine. It won't take us very long.
Steve said he wanted to address you guys.
Sure. Okay, so we'll go ahead and move on to Planning Commission Chair and Vice Chair appointments for 2020. We don't have a lot of people here tonight. That's kind of unfortunate, but I have spoken to several of the other commissioners who are not here, and I would like to nominate Anthony as our chair for next year and Jeff as our vice chair. That's what I'm going to put out there. If anyone else has any other,
I have a question just about, do we know which alternate is going to fill the vacancy?
no, that would be up to the mayor
Yeah,
and the
okay.
next
It's a mayor-
chair
it's a mayor
to just
appointment.
to work that out. Yeah.
I think she told me that she wanted to wait until next year.
Yeah.
Okay. Makes sense.
I think that sounds perfect.
I'm definitely in favor of Anthony being the chair. I was going to make that recommendation as well, so.
Yeah, sounds great.
And then, so I guess the question is, would you accept? And that's,
So I haven't made a motion, but I'm mostly just discussing. I know you had.
Yeah,
a couple
yeah,
of concerns.
I'd be happy to serve as chair. The only thing I wanted to disclose is that probably wouldn't be able to be as involved as Christy has been as far as coming to staff meetings during work hours. I know it's helpful and beneficial for someone from Planning Commission to be there. So even if I couldn't go, I think from a staff point of view, at least having one representative from Planning Commission, they're welcome to come. Is that correct? Or would it
yeah, and
need
it's
to be the chair?
it's definitely not a requirement.
Yeah.
And DRC, typically we're really busy or nothing's going on, and so DRC gets canceled probably 2 out of in a month, and so and it's not something that's required. What we would like the chair to do or the vice chair is to be able to attend city council meetings. So if the chair can't, then the vice chair would attend in their stead. And the only thing they're required to do is to provide an update to the city council. And that happens typically towards the beginning of the meeting, and you're allowed to leave after that. Typically, the chair has stayed just because they want to kind of stay in tune with what's going on. But that's the additional duties is the
And then the
city
other
council.
thing would be to approve some letters that go, that they send to you that you just approve, and then also signing plats, which Kinsley will usually let you know when you come in, and they'll have their plats for you. Going to DRC is helpful. I feel like it makes planning commission run a little bit smoother, just because you'll typically give feedback that helps them make changes before they get here. But other than that, I mean, you usually will see all the same stuff here, so.
When are the DRC meetings?
Thursday mornings.
Yep, 10:30. Like I said, it's you know, it's like 2 or usually cancel
Yeah.
a month. So.
I mean, if it's helpful to you, Anthony, that's easier probably for me to hit than the hitting regular city council meetings.
And we can let you know too. I mean, we have DRC meetings that are more of us talking about the like the application process and how we can be more efficient. We have a lot of internal discussions, so we can shoot you an email and let you know when there's like a big project that's going to be on, something that you'd be interested in. So it really would only be maybe once a month, but it's definitely not required. It just helps to kind of create a connection between staff and the planning commission with these projects.
And my point in bringing that up is if you needed me to fill in once in a while on a DRC meeting because you're busy, then.
Okay.
Okay, well then do I have to make a motion?
Yeah.
Am
so-
I allowed to make a motion as
Well,
the chair?
I mean, you nominated, so I mean, you didn't say motion, but that was a motion. I mean,
Okay.
if you made the nomination, so
So that's.
so
my
you need a
nomination.
second though.
I'll second.
Okay,
Right.
great. All in favor?
Aye.
Right?
Hi.
Yay, very
All right.
excited.
And they're still not here, by the way, so.
Okay, so.
And that would be effective, not this meeting, the next meeting, because she serves for the full year.
In January,
So,
okay.
So I would sign any plats or anything through December 31st?
Yeah.
Right, okay. Should we jump into a work session? Can we do that and then come back?
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. What I wanted to. No, that's okay. Why don't we talk just briefly about, and I can do mine first because I think Liz has a presentation ready for it. But all I wanted to say for the accessory dwelling units and for the short-term rentals, we're kicking that back up. And so I wanted just to start putting it on the agenda. The accessory dwelling units, we had from a staff level proposed several changes. The city council wanted us to bring that back to the planning commission and consider different things. There was a lot of concern about parking. And so we've analyzed a lot of other cities to see what they do in regards to parking for accessory dwelling units. We've looked at capping the accessory dwelling unit size below the 1,200 square feet, which is allowed now. We still need to clarify that the size of the unit is the lesser of 50% of the main dwelling unit or 1,200 square feet, or whatever that number is dropped down to. There's consideration of dropping the number of bedrooms, like putting a cap on possibly 2 bedrooms. Provo does a limitation on the occupants. You can't limit a dwelling, a house, below what the state requires, but you are allowed to do the accessory dwelling units because that's above and beyond what is already allowed. And so what the plan is to bring you several options, different draft ordinances, and we can look at those. And so.
But just for clarity, the concern isn't necessarily the number of people. In the end, it's the cars that they're worried
Yeah.
about. Okay, so.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was the overall impact of adding, because you are in a way creating a duplex, for better or worse.
Yeah.
And we want to maintain the single family nature of these neighborhoods and we do have a lot of high density. It's not like we're a city without high density. We're 75% of our units are a townhome up, apartments, condos. So we really, our single family neighborhoods are actually kind of a precious resource, because we don't have a ton of it from a percentage wise. And so we need to allow the accessory dwelling units because it helps our affordable housing, but we need to preserve the single family character of these neighborhoods.
How do these codes affect if someone's renting out rooms in their house?
So
Something I've been becoming aware of, there's quite a few homes.
Or it's not a
Some of
separate
the
unit.
really
it's-
nice,
Yeah.
bigger
Yeah.
homes, they are renting out rooms.
So you follow the family definition. So it's one family or four individuals. And we've had some calls, so that's something that if you guys are aware of those.
So can you rent out to another family? So there's situations where if there's a family living in a house and they're
Yeah.
renting out several bedrooms to like another family.
Yeah, so it's either or. So you can, so how the definition is written, and there's a few different options, but the main ones are four individuals or one related family. And so it's not both. You can't combine them. You can't, and so you wouldn't be able to do two separate family units unless the total number was under four. So,
Or there's also a third one, so if there's two unrelated adults with their separate children, that's also okay. But like we get calls for it a lot, especially me. Like I always tell them like you can't combine. So like we'll have some people who will be renting out a house to like two brothers plus three of their friends. So that brings the total occupancy to 5. But because two of them are related, that doesn't put them as one family unit, and then you can still put 3 more people in. You fall into one definition, but there's no combining.
yeah, so a family, and then we've got this a few times. Well, can I count a family as an individual? And
Yeah.
then we have another family, and that's another
So you can rent
individual.
out one room to an entire family and then
Yeah.
2 other rooms to individuals.
Yeah, it is a tough thing to regulate, but we do, McKenna goes out, she'll send out letters, she'll contact the owners, inform them of the policy. And then if need be, we do send the sheriff's office out to interview occupants. So, let us know if they're out there. Typically, when a situation gets bad enough, we start getting phone calls, and it's usually from parking.
Yeah.
Someone's driveway gets blocked, or their mailbox, or I don't know, you know. I guess we don't have mailboxes, but.
So just for my clarity then, like if you had a family and there were 5 people in it, and then they rented out one room to an adult that was unrelated to them,
You wouldn't be able to do that.
that wouldn't work. Okay.
No.
Makes sense.
'Cause that kicks you into, because you can only be one family
Yeah, so-
or 4 individuals.
So
Or
if a
there-
family's
and
living
there's
there, there
Oh,
can't be
so
anything, any other
family-
rental down.
Family cannot rent to another family.
Or can't rent to anyone.
But
else.
there is that third option that McKenna was talking about, and so if you fall under one of those, but you can't combine the boxes. There's basically 3 boxes, right? And you gotta, if you meet the definition of one of those, you're good, but you can't combine the 2. You know what I mean? Or like one of the 3 boxes. You're either, you fit into 1, 2, or 3.
Got it.
But there still is.
So if you're,
someone has their
so
neighbor
if
doing
you're a
something-
couple and you have a child, and then you rent out to another person, then what we would do is we would use the individual category. We'd say, okay, there's four individuals.
Oh,
Does that make sense?
so they could do that.
Yeah, they could do that if they don't extend beyond the 4. Or it could be one family of 12 people. You know,
Right.
that's not
Yeah,
uncommon.
can't limit family size, I
Yeah.
suppose, yeah.
But they could rent out to one person.
Right.
So if your neighbor was doing something like that, they would just call McKenna? Or to,
Yeah, they
Yeah.
submit a complaint
You
online.
can submit a complaint, you can call me, and then what we do is I have one of the sheriffs go out to verify that, so that it's not just hearsay, but we actually just had like 3 in Bridgeport. And there were 3 on the same street, and we had our officers go out, and he went out for 2 houses originally, and then one of those guys there told him there was a 3rd house on the street.
yeah.
They do
And
tell
so
on each
it's
other.
kind of,
Yeah,
yeah,
if I can't
These guys
do
are
it,
doing it.
yeah, exactly. It's like, well,
Thank you
nobody
for the
can do it. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
It's one of those, if I can't have my toast, you can't have yours either. Yeah.
Totally. Okay, well, I'm not sure how long we were gonna wait for.
Let's go ahead and get started.
Okay,
Yeah, I know Eric just said there's something you're doing right now.
perfect.
But
Okay.
anyway, I'll have more formal ordinances put together so that we can go over the language. I just wanted to start putting this back on the agenda because it was a direction from the city council that we start
Sure.
reviewing it.
Makes
So,
And that short-term rentals one, that's brand new. Is that what
short-term
that's in there?
rentals is something that we've talked about a long time ago with the city council, and And we put the ordinance in place like 2 years ago that short-term rentals were not allowed. They were not permitted in the city, and it's very clear in the code. So there's been a lot of interest in allowing it in some form or fashion.
So that's all new from what
Yeah.
we've got. Okay.
Most likely
When you say
the,
renewed interest, you mean from
the,
citizens or
the
from
guidance
council?
from both, yeah. So the guidance that we got from the city council was that they don't want investors owning and doing short-term rentals. That they, it would be an owner-occupied type product. And so you would either, and how we've seen that is, if it's like a basement, like an ADU, it would allow them to rent out their basement, but having the owner on site would make sure that it's managed at a higher level. I managed the short-term rental program in Cottonwood Heights, and it was primarily investor-owned. And we saw a pretty big difference between like an ADU type situation and investor-owned. Just because a lot of times those guys aren't even in the state, they're in California or somewhere else. And so you don't manage it as high of a level if you're not living inside the unit. So we were gonna come back with some options for owner occupied. And that seemed like kind of a safe way to step into short-term rentals instead of just allowing them just, across the city.
Got it.
Okay. All right, why don't we jump back to our sign standard waiver? And Liz, are you gonna present that, or? you have the
Yeah,
applicant?
I'll go over it real quick.
Okay.
Okay, oh, oops. So this is a sign standard waiver for a multi-tenant monument sign in the Yard A area. Specifically this area, the road going into the roundabout in front of the Megaplex. So the applicant is proposing a 17 foot in height monument sign that has 100 square feet of sign area, and that includes halo lighting around some of the individual letters, specifically the yard that you see there. The sign standard waiver allows the planning commission to approve additional height and additional square footage. And for multi-tenant monument signs, the additional height can be a maximum of 20 feet. They're at 17, so they're under it. And then the maximum sign area is 100 square feet, which they're at now as well. They have 5 tenant sign spaces that are approximately 2 feet in height, 7 feet in length. The base of the sign is a light colored brick, and the other colors consist of gray and black. Staff didn't have any concerns of the placement that they're proposing. So they're proposing 2 locations, and let me get to it. So it's on the north side of that road that goes into the roundabout. That's right here, or on the south side. They would rather do the north for a view of turning left onto Mill Road. But there's a public utility easement there, so they have to get permission from Rocky Mountain and Dominion to do that. So I put a condition in here that they will, prior to submitting for a building permit, they will submit a final site plan to staff for approval, and then as well as documentation from Rocky Mountain Power and Dominion as like an approval or acknowledgement that they know there's a sign going in their easement.
So option 1 is the preferred spot?
And so
Is
staff,
option 2 compliant with the view requirements?
yeah.
It
mhm,
is?
yeah,
Okay.
mhm.
It's just not as preferable as,
Right.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah, staff did not have a concern on the south one for site view triangles. It's not in a site view triangle. Engineering didn't have an issue with it, so they would be okay to do it on the south side. So staff is recommending approval with the conditions we have there in the staff report. And Eric is here if you guys have questions for the applicant.
So question I have, there's a very similar sign on the south end of the project, right? That we looked at, I think it was a month or two ago.
I believe it was approved.
Yeah.
With that
yeah,
site
on
plan,
the
yeah.
Very south end, okay.
Is this exactly the same as that sign?
I can't recall quite, but I can go back and look if you guys want me to.
I was just curious if we're just talking about the same sign.
Anyway, do I have to say my name?
Yes.
Eric with X Development. Yeah, it should be the same. If it's not, the only difference would be possibly size, within 10% of that size.
But everything else looks the same, it matches
Yeah,
all the
everything's
design
the
elements.
same. Yep. And then I just wanted to echo that I would have a strong preference for location number 1 as well. Again, I'm thinking of me biking there, but you know, if someone's turning left and they're staring at a sign instead of
Yeah.
what's coming at them. So yeah, option 1 sounds good to me. I didn't have any other questions. Yeah,
Sorry, this is the sign that they had for that site,
yeah, it's
Christy.
good. I like the consistency.
I have no concerns. Looks good to me.
I'm trying to find a concern, but I don't have any.
I think it just has to do with what you're dealing with afterwards with the text amendment. Okay. That's fine. Yeah.
Okay, great. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion. Let me find my verbiage here. I make a motion to approve the sign standard waiver for 600 mil LC with the conditions listed in the staff report.
I'll second that.
Great. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great. All right. Okay. So Morgan, then do we need to go back into a working session to go through any of these more specifically? Sign code. Okay, great.
Liz has a presentation ready for the sign code, and I'll have
do it.
something more formal for the other 2 items.
Okay, great.
Okay, so we've been talking about signs for a few months now, and I'm just gonna go over 2, the ones really been talking about, wall signs and temporary signs. The bigger, like, commercial, empty development signs. So this is our existing wall signs in our commercial areas. They get 1 square foot per every 1 linear foot of building frontage, maximum of 60 square feet per sign, or a total of 120 square feet for 2 signs. So, as we've gone through this, we've talked about a bunch of different ways to do this, and I've come up with 4 different options. The first 2 and last 2 are similar in like the sign size, and then they change for like sign area and max number of signs and other specifics. So the first 2 are look at a percentage of the elevations of a building. So 15% of primary elevations, 5% of secondary elevations. The first option has a maximum sign area of 600 square feet total. And then the second option doesn't have a maximum. And then for number of signs, I put 3 signs per elevation. So if they did it on all sides, they'd have 7 signs basically. 9 signs. 4 times 3 is what? 12. There you go. And then the other one, I just did a max of elevations. So they could do 3 elevations with as many signs as they wanted, and they can spread the allowed square footage among different signs. So it's just a little more flexible. And the first option is flexible, restrictive. 600 square feet is quite a bit. Options 3 and 4 kind of kept it the same, but increased the maximums with our existing. So 1 square foot per linear foot of building frontage. Option 3 has a maximum. Option 4 doesn't. And then maximum number of signs. I kind of threw this in there. We don't have to do a maximum number of signs or a maximum number of elevations. It's just something I've seen, and it's something we've dealt with the sign standard waiver. And then for the other, I put, again, the allowed square footage may spread between different signs. And then I put number of signs and elevations may be approved basically through staff if they wanted more signs on the elevation. I think it was David Church who said he would have staff do that type of stuff for signs. So I just threw that in there. But these are 4 different options. I think that's kind of what you guys wanted to go towards. So we can talk about wall signs first, or I can keep going.
I have a question. So a lot of the catalyst for revisiting this, with the golf club and making sure that we have a code in place that can accommodate when it makes sense to have larger signage. Would all 4 of these options accommodate what they're looking for there?
Yep.
So I'd want to make sure that we don't recommend something that we have to revisit in a month. I also had a question about, in Lehigh, most of the big buildings, they'll have like 1, maybe 2 signs. In Pleasant Grove, there's like
So
8 of them or something like that.
the
Looks
first
a little
two
off to me, so I was just wondering how that would fit into this as well.
the first 2 options are literally Lehigh.
Okay.
That's how they do it. And Midvale does it the same way, but they do it the second option. They don't have a maximum sign area, and that's where Topgolf is. So,
Okay.
I did do a few examples. Let's see if we can find out. So the front elevation of the golf of what they propose is 10,461 square feet. I'm thinking, let's do the math. So 10. Okay, so they can have 1,569 square feet of sign. So that would be this whole wall where the sign is now.
Sorry, you're saying that the sign could be the entire wall
Mhm.
because based off of.
Based off of that, they could do that's the amount of square footage they could do. So they could make the whole wall the sign, or they could do different signs. Yeah, we do have, so it can't go above the roof line is how, and then we have a height of,
So they could do that with all 3 of those options. What you
not
just-
with all 3 of them.
With
Let's see.
which option?
The 15%, they could do, this one would limit them, we say max 250 square, this would limit them to the 600, but these ones wouldn't.
Where you don't limit the actual sign size.
Right.
Yeah, the option 1 and 2, you cap out on an individual sign where you have to allocate that additional square footage to an additional sign.
Yeah. Well, they could do 1 square foot per linear building frontage, but there's no cap. So you'd measure the length of the building, and that's how much they have.
So the same for that, your example, their building is not 1,500 feet long.
Right, I don't know how long it is.
The issue I have with the linear frontage is when people build up,
Yeah.
they're gonna have reduced linear. I mean, so you could have a big building.
For scaling,
The first 2
Surface
options
area.
are better.
I
for-
like the percentage one the
Yeah.
best. Those are, I think
Yeah, 'cause
that
you could
works the
have
best. It's
a 4-story
flexible.
building that's not that
Which
long.
is what we'll have in the town center
Yeah.
more.
Yeah, exactly.
I just have a feeling if we went
Less
the linear
low-rise.
foot, we might be revisiting this
Yeah.
again.
Can you put the 4 options back up on the?
Yep.
So the main difference between 1 and 2, or the only difference, is just one has a cap, one doesn't.
Yep.
Okay.
– 600 square feet's a pretty big sign.
It's very big.
When in working with council or taking direction from them, is there an appetite for the unlimited signage, or maybe it's mixed? You didn't get
I-
direction from that? really?
No. Yeah, go for it.
when we talked about it, Tice is here, so, but he's not a council member in this meeting, right?
No,
technically. Yeah. So, my, when I was at the council meeting, it seemed like the council wanted to provide a code that would accommodate the golf club, and even looking at like the Top Golf in Midville, that would accommodate a large sign that would attract eyeballs, and so and they seem to be okay with scaling the sign code or the size with the building, and you know for me, I guess 600 feet is large, but if you have a really large building, you know it fits. You know it's gonna scale with it. I mean there are things that we could do. We could Liz kind of pointed out it caps can't go above the height of the roof line, but you know also we could look at like the overall design, and then the height of like the bottom of the sign to the top of the sign, the overall height, so that you don't necessarily get a sign that would cover the from grade to the peak of the peak of the building. And so some cities do 6 feet, some could go higher. I mean, it depends. I mean, we could look at that just so you don't get a sign that goes from the ground level all the way up to the peak of the roof. If that's a concern of yours, I don't think we're going to see that, but you know, it's easy enough to put something in the code to safeguard against something like that.
So some examples of what would compare to like your 600 foot or maybe exceed that would be some of your big box stores.
Like the big Target logo and all that,
Target,
yeah.
Walmart, maybe even Macy's, some of those. The last time we were discussing this, I measured Walmart, and just the single Walmart, the main sign in the middle of Walmart is pushing like 600 to 800 square feet.
Yeah, so I think I would need to keep that in consideration too, because you know, grocery store will come, and again, if we need to, if we're just gonna have to revisit to meet their corporate standards or whatever it might be, maybe it makes sense to have.
600 feet is a pretty good size.
Yeah.
I mean, it does put an overall cap.
You can spread the square footage, so if you don't, you can make your sides smaller on the sides, you can move that to the front.
So just some Google research here. It looks like the standard kind of Utah billboard size is about a 14-foot by 48-foot sign, which is 672 square feet. So when you think about the billboards that you're passing on the freeway, you know, 600 is just a shade under that size. Part of me thinks if that's big enough to see when you're driving down a freeway, that's probably big enough to have in your city. The tricky thing is, to me, is the design of sometimes it's, and I realize this is harder to regulate, but it's less about the size of the sign sometimes as it is the actual design and implementation of the sign. You know, like the Top Golf facility in Midvale, you know, their signage kind of is integrated into the building, into the architecture of the building, and looks really nice. You could also have someone slap up, you know, a really big, tacky
Yeah, basically a billboard on the
billboard,
side of
yeah,
the
right
building.
on the side of their building, and then under this circumstance, both would be compliant. Whereas one, you know, it fits in better. It's still making a big visual draw and statement and identifying itself. So that's the hard thing for me is on the size. It's like you can do a big sign that works well. You could do a big sign that's really becomes an eyesore pretty quick, depending on what's on the sign.
Yeah, the quality, content,
quality of it,
design,
exactly.
That's tougher to regulate.
And that's harder to regulate, I get it, but that's just kind of what's in my head right now as we talk about it.
So I've seen 2 sign codes that actually didn't have maximums. It was all based on design. And that's what I would recommend. If we're concerned about size, like 600 or no maximum, that we do it by design. And I think one of the regulations was shall not be excessive or create an eyesore or something like that. And we can put that in there, and we are allowed to regulate by design.
I mean, on those more subjective things, code should be very clear, black and white. So how do you, one person's eyesore is not another person's eyesore. So I guess that's where I would, if someone pushed back
We
and
would-
saying, hey, that's
yeah.
not a fair decision.
We'd have to define it.
Yeah, okay.
And that's something that all cities deal with as well. Just to add to something real quick, if it's, so I hear your concern, if your concern is like, you don't essentially want to create a opportunity for someone to do like a smaller billboard, but still a significant size sign. You could have, from a process standpoint, once they hit a threshold for area size, that it kicks it into a planning commission review. So that's something that you guys could look at too. It would just provide an additional level of review. So if they go above like 300 square feet, that's something to consider if you're really concerned about having like a 600 square foot, billboard attached to a building. I don't think we'll get that, but I do see the concern, and that's something that, our codes need to be tight enough that we're not going to create a detriment with that kind of thing. But I think that would be easy enough. You could just write the code where you have a threshold where it kicks it into a planning commission.
I also have a question. So you've probably seen it, like the other side of Geneva Road from the theater. There's actually a really cool looking building with a wall mural. How would that fit into, how would we treat that in the sign code? Is that just building paint, or is that sign?
It depends, yeah. It'd be considered a wall sign, but if it's related to the business, that's when it becomes a sign. But if it's like a pizza shop with a unicorn on it, that's just a mural.
Okay. So, okay, the distinguishing between
Yeah, it's
whether it's
art
business related or
and
art,
signage,
kind of,
yeah.
okay.
We'd send those to David Church, honestly.
Yeah. Well, I'm just curious because, I know a lot of people like that building. Some people probably don't. That's probably actually a really good example of what some people would say is an eyesore. Other people say that's really cool. We want more of that. So,
Like Morgan said, you guys can do the process-wise if it goes above a certain square footage. Lehigh kind of does that. They have specific signs the planning commission actually approves as a conditional use. And then they have certain signs where if it goes above a square footage, it has to go through a conditional use.
At that point, then with the conditional use, then, getting to what we're talking about, what's, and I know because David Church has talked to us, we're supposed to, we make all of our decisions based on what the code says. So if they're going above a certain size, then does it become to the discretion of the commission, or do we still need to draft up the specific language of what we're still approving or reviewing that up against? Does that make sense?
Yeah, so the intent, the purpose, that's what we would look at, is if you felt the sign meant the intent of the sign ordinance, then that would be your
Okay.
approval basis.
That's the basis.
Yeah.
You,
Is that-
you can add some standards too.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if there's certain aspects of signs you absolutely don't want, then I would suggest you put that in the code. You can't account for everything, but if there's common things that you absolutely hate that you see in signs, then you would put that in the code. And if there's things you want, you put that in the code. So I think you're right. The clearer you are, the better it's going to be from a city side and us regulating it. It's where we have ambiguity, and we try to enforce off of more of what our desires are right at that moment.
Right.
Where we're gonna have a hard time with appeal.
Right.
So, something to keep in mind.
Okay. What kind of feedback do you want from us tonight, other than?
Then pick one.
So-
are you guys more comfortable with the
Trying to avoid that
percentage?
part.
I noticed.
So option one, we could write it and craft it to say that's the max size, but anything above that's requested could be something that
Yeah,
comes
so
through.
we could lower it to 300, and anything above 300, we could say has to go through planning commission. We can write it up like that.
Or what you were saying, Anthony, is 600 is the limit, or
Yeah, and then if something
Or
big
if you
came
want
in
more.
if
Yeah.
someone really wants to make the case that they need more than that 600 square feet,
to show the design.
then they come in and show the design.
So we're talking about a conditional use permit then in that case?
Yeah, yeah.
Is this? I'm gonna ask you, this is a quick clarifying question. So the 600 square feet, so column 2, is that per elevation or is that for the total building? That's per elevation, okay. No, that's great. Maybe we'll just put that in there, per elevation.
And you get 3 of those 600 square foot. If you had enough area, you could have 3 of those per elevation if your project was big enough.
600 per so yeah, you can have 3 signs.
3 600 square foot signs. 3 signs
that
total.
equal 600
Total.
Total.
per elevation.
Yeah,
So
so
I-
if you had 3 businesses and they had a main front and they all wanted signage, the total aggregate signage of that elevation could not extend above 600 square feet.
Okay.
See,
But
so
you
I,
could
I,
do
Which
one
isn't very
sign.
much.
I would like to have a path forward to exceed that if it makes sense. I
Right.
don't want to just draw a hard line. So I'd be fine with option 1 with a conditional use going above that, or honestly, I'd be okay with option 2, just knowing full well that we can't always regulate the content or really ever regulate the content of the sign. So some signs you might not think are attractive yourself.
Just remember with conditional use permits, I like them. I like that there's a path for people to have a waive if they have a idea. But just know that when you put that in there, then that leaves a way and it will come, and usually immediately.
So what
And
would
so I'm just saying, from experience, when you leave the way in, that people will take it and then you will be doing it all the time. And so just know that, are you willing, are you going to let this happen every time? Or are there gonna be times where you're gonna say, no, we're not gonna allow that, and, you know? You have to be willing, are you willing to, are you just making a way open so that's just open, in which case, why even have a conditional use permit?
So are you personally leaning more towards option 1 or 2?
I'm not, I'm just discussing.
But I want your thoughts. On the record.
You're still the chair.
I don't know, I'm.
Chair,
I'm
we,
torn about it.
when you're done with your discussion, we do have a request for comments from the public, so.
I hear what you're saying, and I just, if one 600 square foot sign is almost the size of a billboard, would we want that to go out without reviewing it? Just seems like if there's one sign, if they're not gonna share it across several, there's one sign that's like literally the size of a billboard, because that's like 672, then are we okay with not having eyes on it? Because that seems like a pretty big sign. That
No, so my point is, I like having eyes on it, I think that's great, it's great to have those checkpoints. It's just, it's a lot harder to say no to somebody. It's a lot easier to regulate the codes, and the codes just say no. It's a lot harder to say no when someone comes in here and is asking for something.
And I think what Jessica's saying, I mean, I think that's a great idea, actually, just in her saying that now, I was just thinking about it, because, I mean, really, I think that kind of addresses the issue of having a billboard type sign. Because if you get 3 people that come in with 200 square foot signs, that's probably fine. But then it's when you get one person with a 600 square foot sign where we're going to want a little bit more. And you don't necessarily have to make it a conditional use. You can make it a permitted use with standards that you review. Like site plans are permitted uses, but you still review them and make sure that they check all the boxes. So it would be a similar thing to that. It doesn't necessarily have to be conditional use. Conditional use does allow you to add more conditions, but it does put you in a spot where you got to make sure those conditions are connected with the code. And that was what David Church was saying. It's better to have a permitted use with conditions in the code that you're basically saying, okay, are you meeting these standards in the code?
Yeah.
Where does the sign standard waiver process, like we just went through tonight, fit in with this? So like if someone comes in with a sign standard waiver, then we review it. Would that still apply to this, or?
No, the sign standard waiver would change. You guys wouldn't see them probably wouldn't see them anymore. I mean, you wouldn't, because the maximum for a wall sign is 25%, which is not 600 square feet. It's like,
Right.
I think 100 or something.
So maybe that's kind of getting to your point, is if we still like to have that layer of being able to review it as a commission, having some criteria when it's over a certain threshold, just like we do with the sign standard waiver. So there's still a pathway to have that larger sign when there's a reason that justifies it, and then we can review it.
Mm-hmm.
Is it right there, comments?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. So Morgan, with like the sign standard waiver that we went through tonight, that Jeff was mentioning, there was a possibility that the commission could reject that, correct?
If you don't meet the standards in the code, and so whatever the standards are in the code, you have to meet. And then if you don't meet the conditions that they add, so they could basically approve it with conditions, but if those conditions push you beyond where you're wanting to go, it's in a way it's kind of a denial as well. So yeah, it does allow them to have that discretion of approving it. They're the authority on the approval body over that permit.
Yeah, and I would appreciate that, and I actually applaud that you have the ability to design the city how you want. How do you write the code? So I guess we're here probably mostly for the golf venue at this time, and we already have the Megaplex with its big sign, and it's very necessary for certain uses, and how do you limit other uses from putting in something that the city or staff would not consider, a pretty sign in your eyes? So from our standpoint, whether it's 600 feet or it's 700 feet, however that sign gets, and if you like the Topgolf sign, you'll love what they're actually going to create on this building once we have some guidance as to how it needs to be. If it's 630 square feet, it would be fantastic if you guys had the ability to approve, like the sign standard waiver Morgan has. But I understand you'd like it, to have all the teeth in there necessary to reject it if you don't like it. Guidance from our side, to shed light from the developer side, is the more ambiguous it is, the more difficult it becomes for us to hit that target, which means more meetings and more meetings with you, to try and do things in an efficient manner, and for us to middleman large corporations and large retail stores that have their standard requirements no matter where they go, and they are very inflexible in today's market due to retail difficulty, and the signage is a very touchy subject for a lot of these retailers. If you guys, with the help of your council, could draft some type of code that would give us clarity, but give you the flexibility to approve when a use is beneficial for the city to have their standard corporate large sign, such as the Topgolf sign in Midvale, or a huge Walmart sign, or a huge Target sign. From our standpoint, I don't care if it's 300 square feet is your maximum today, or 100 square feet is your maximum, so long as you guys have the flexibility and ability, because I'm confident we'll design something that you'll like for the golf venue. Maybe that's 650 square feet. We don't have that exact square footage today. We're waiting for this. I would not like to put a ceiling or a limit on that, if that makes sense. At 600 square feet, I'd like you guys to have the flexibility to say, oh, well, they designed something that's 700 square feet and it's gorgeous and we'd love to have it. Does that make sense? So I don't know if David Church can help with that, Liz, or if you guys need. So, brought up something about uses. Can you also do that? Like, say, if it's commercial, up to this size. If it's retail, this size.
Doesn't make the code is, I mean, then we're getting into specifics.
Yeah,
and then
it gets.
We're
yeah.
trying not to look at content. That's where it gets tricky.
Yeah.
That's why we don't do it that way right now.
You can do it by district though, right?
Yeah, we could do, I looked at I did look at the districts, and we just don't, how we write our code, the chapter would be a lot longer if we did it by districts, because then we're making a whole table for each individual sign that we now have to define and treat equally with all other signs by size, location, number. It's a whole different process, and which we can do, it's just gonna be a lot longer.
I really think that how it's done up here is, taken Anthony's or like a mixture of what Jessica's proposing, most of the signs that we have in the city, I mean, 99%, I mean, excluding the megaplex right now, would be a permitted use through staff. It'd be administrative. So from a process standpoint, it would provide more square footage for these people, so they have more flexibility. And then they'd be able to get processed through a staff member. But it would account for things like the golf club that we want to have the flexibility so that we could have that sign, but we still want to be able to have some review of it. And it would just be a planning commission review. So, from if we planned it out right, I mean, we could get it through the process pretty quickly. So I don't see that being a huge hindrance, especially if we get it done prior to a certificate of occupancy. I mean, there's plenty of time to work something like that through the process. That's one thing that's nice about a sign going on a building that's being constructed, is that you do have kind of some time during that construction process where you can work on those things. But I just how it's written, I think you would be able to, you'd be able to get most of these through an administrative process fairly quickly, and then the one or two would trigger planning commission review. But it's not terrible. I mean, it's a few weeks, and then you're on the agenda.
Yeah, so I would be personally open to option one, as long as there's a path forward for exceptions above. And if someone wants to lower that 600, like you said, 300 or something like that, that's fine too. I think as long as there's a path forward to review, or maybe, just setting the threshold of where you'd want to review things. We don't want to be a bottleneck either, though.
Right.
So you don't want to bring it so small that every single person has to come through us on these small retail signs.
And if you'd like to, we could do a kind of a quick and dirty analysis of the sign permits that have been approved, just to give you an idea of what kind of the average square footage that we have currently in the city. And I think you'll find that even 300 square feet, I think 90%, almost all of them would fall under the 300 square feet. So.
Well, that's because they're small buildings.
But
We haven't had
Yeah.
any buildings come in, so
They're-
it would make sense.
They're creating a sign to fit their building.
Yeah.
So you're not gonna have something excessive unless, like how Midvale, the golf club does it and create into the building.
Would it be helpful if I sent you, Liz, a schematic of that building with the square footage of how that is in Midvale?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I tend to agree with what he's saying, in that we want to be able. Again, for me, it's like the size of the sign really matters less to me than the nature of the sign. You can make a big sign look really cool. You can make a big sign look really bad. You can make a small sign look really bad. But I understand it's harder to regulate. And as a commission, what we don't want just loose, open-ended bounds. So it's just us talking, well, we like this color, we don't like that color. That makes it hard for us to justify decisions. It makes it hard for you as an applicant. There's a lot of time and money that goes into preparing these designs for the signage, and it is a process. And so we want to be efficient for everybody. We want it to be clear. I don't have, tonight, I'm trying to think of, are there ways, is there a way so that once you cross a certain threshold, then you do have to come in, and there are certain qualitative criteria that you have to meet if you do want that bigger sign, so that there's at least a few ways to try to ensure, a little bit more quality in the way that sign is executed, because you might have what you guys have always presented is it's been thoughtfully thought through and designed, but there will be applicants that maybe don't have that, and so, like you said, having the teeth to be able to justify a decision as a commission to say, well, that bigger sign we'll accept, or that bigger sign we don't want to accept this way. And it's a hard thing. I mean, I do work around the country, and the signage requirements are different everywhere, and some places are super stringent, and it doesn't matter who you are, you're gonna comply if you want to be in that area. And we're not you know, as prestigious an area or as desirable an area as other parts of the country that can be overly stringent. But I think we also want to be careful, you know, and intentional about the way we do it. But so I guess bottom line is, for me, option 1 or 2, I'm fine with kind of either way, as long as there's a certain threshold that then there is a review process with the commission, and then there's certain qualitative benchmarks that we can review that against and justify a decision to grant, you know, to approve larger signs or to not approve larger signs. That's clear from the applicant when they start down that path, and it's clear for us as we're reviewing it.
Yeah, I'd be really interested to know, from what you guys could see, you know, quickly, how, you know, the majority would pass under a certain threshold, and then above that, it kind of starts to, as far as a single sign size, and that we can kind of put that number in a place that makes sense, and so that there is, I mean, so that there is also a pathway for like you said, the standard size for certain, you know, retailers or businesses and stuff. I mean, we want them to come, and I understand that there's probably in their manufacturing, they're making it a certain size, that kind of thing. So, and if it still fits, we want a pathway for them to be able to do it, whether it's 600 and change or whatever. But it would be interesting to know how most of them could fit through and not bottleneck, and how we can capture those ones that do require a second look.
We get some data on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, be great.
Okay.
That would be good.
So I'll bring back wall signs for a work session. Or is that, or do you guys want me to bring back like options again with what we've just discussed, and you can pick one that night? Whatever you're comfortable
Well, it
with.
sounds like just kind of diving deeper on the option 1 or 2, right, is what
Yeah.
we're looking at, with just
One or two.
an idea of where a threshold would be, where the majority of them would be able to be administrative,
Okay.
and then, yeah.
So your question, do you bring it back as a work session or as a line item to approve?
Yeah, public hearing.
I think we're close enough, probably the next round. Approve, or do you think we need another work session?
Yeah, well, if we did a public hearing, so I think this gives Liz a lot of good direction. So
Yeah.
I think we can put together an ordinance, gear it up for public hearing, and then if you're not comfortable with it, you could add some changes and then continue the public hearing, and then we could, you know, so basically a public hearing can also essentially serve the purpose of work session.
Right.
You know, this meeting was just to give us enough direction to draft the ordinance.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll bring it back and we'll figure it out. So anything else, Eric?
Yeah, just as far as timing goes, just for design and final material ordering and whatnot, you know, January, February at the latest would be great from our side.
I planned our meeting in January, so.
Great.
Okay, temporary signs. So this is what our existing code is. I did separate them. We're mostly gonna talk about commercial districts, but residential, 6 square feet, sign area, 4 feet in height, private property only, and 2 per lot. And then other districts, it's 30 square feet, 8 feet in height, private property, and 2 per lot. So this first option,
Can you just refresh my mind, temporary, less than 30 days, or 30 days or less?
yeah, well, kind of. There's 2. There's less and then there's more. But temporary, I can't quite remember the definition, but it's meant not to be permanent. So like attached to anything, basically. A structure is the difference.
So like now enrolling, now renting, those kind
Those
of signs
type
would
of
be
signs.
temporary?
Yes.
The banners, okay.
Yep. Okay, so this first option, I did it by acres. Last time we had talked, we were looking at the length of frontage along roads. I didn't like that one just because the city's so big and not all the lots are subdivided, so we don't really know. So I did it by acres, and So for residential, you can see same way we did less than 1 acre, 1 to 5, 5 to 10, and then 10 and plus. Each of them are allowed 5 signs that don't exceed 6 square feet. So that's like your typical yard sign. And then as you get up higher, you're allowed 1 additional sign or 2 or 3 at a different square footage. So I'll go in under all other zones, 1 to 5 acres. You can see 5 signs per street frontage not to exceed 6 square feet, and 1 sign not to exceed 64 square feet. So they can have 6 total signs on that lot or parcel or development, and then so forth. So it goes up. So that's one option. This would just encompass everything. So we give it a maximum area, 30 square feet per sign, but then projects with 2 acres or larger in size may be allowed with an additional 32 square foot of signage for each acre over 2 acres up to a maximum of 200 square feet. And then maximum height, 8 feet, or they can get additional, if they have more sign area, they can get additional height up to 16 feet. And then maximum number would be, I divided it up less than 2 acres and 2 acres and more. So 2 signs for less than 2 acres, and then 5 signs for anything above 2 acres.
What is the reason to be looking at our temporary sign code changes?
The Forge. They have bigger signs than what's allowed right now, and the same thing with the town center development, and we were directed by city council to look at it
To
too.
allow them to have bigger signs?
Mhm. And then I put other that they can spread the square footage between the signs, and staff can approve additional signage upon good reason. So this encompasses everything, and then the other one goes through acres. And when I say the second one encompasses everything, I'm mostly talking commercial districts.
That's my question is so the 2 examples you brought up there are commercial developments where they're obviously wanting to advertise to potential tenants and businesses, right?
Mm-hmm.
So which I see the reasoning for that. What would be the reasoning on the residential to make any changes?
So we had the villas come in. We did send them a sign violation. And they came in and just were talking about signs, and they said they typically do a larger sign, about 32 square feet. And so
Is it the cow pushing the lawnmower? That one?
That one's down.
Okay. I'm just wondering if that's the size we're talking about there.
But so then we also have
Don't mow lawns no winter.
we have lakefront edge homes where they have a bunch of signs out there as well for a development that
So big residential.
yeah,
project.
it's a
bigger
big development
residential.
again.
Yeah. That's why I would suggest changing residential as well, so we're getting those. And I think the acre one actually does that perfectly. This one does not touch residential. I wouldn't do this one. Maybe for residential, maybe. I'd maybe change like the maximum height.
And so even though some of these signs could stay up for 2 years, they still fall underneath temporary.
Yeah, so we'll change that when I come back through. We'll change it so it's very specific. Like last C of O, where when a certain percentage of the land is already developed, they'll have to take it down.
This has something to do with political signs or anything though, right?
No, if we did the residential like this, then yeah, it would. But your lots, no
You're
one's
allowed
an
bigger signs
acre.
with this,
Yeah,
right?
well, they would be allowed 5 per street frontage,
So
not
my
to
house, I'm on like 1/10 of an acre. I could have 5
5 signs per
signs
square
with
footage,
6
street
square feet.
footage. Yeah. Mhm.
each that are temporary in my yard, and all of my neighbors could do that too. I mean,
Yeah.
that's okay. Well,
I mean, so you can
fortunately, people
change
aren't into
those.
that, but
5
yeah,
is a
that's
lot, but we can change that. It doesn't have to be 5.
So how does that work? So these developments, like you mentioned, they're residential developments, but they're selling off lots. So how do they measure that area for their temporary sign? Because again, I'm seeing, so their justification is they've got acres of this big development. They need a big sign to attract buyers.
Yeah. So like the villas,
Yeah.
they're actually not subdivided technically. So yeah, you would look at the whole
You
area.
would look at the HOA.
Yeah.
Okay.
So my 2 cents then, if it's in the residential and less than an acre, I would probably say like 1 sign.
Okay. Well, right now we
5.
allow 2. Are you okay sticking with what we have now?
Yeah, 2. 5. Again, I don't think it'll happen much, but I don't think you want to put a whole bunch in, so.
Do you guys like the acres better?
Versus square foot?
Acres or just saying 30 square feet, or for over acres you can get more?
I think it helps its scale with the big of the size of the development, so I like that.
Okay.
I think we have the
Do you have a
desire to
preference?
comment.
Okay.
I'll go ahead and take a comment from the audience. Dave, I think you had a comment. Is that right? Yeah. But just come up to the mic.
Hi, David Lorraine. On that topic, near and dear to some of our hearts about political signs. Our current code allows for 2 signs. In the last cycle, there were several homes that had more than that. So I'm thinking that if that's going to be a typical usage, you probably would want to limit it to 2 signs. You'd want, 5 or 6 is probably a better number. I mean, the fact is, very few people are going to use that many signs. But, next election, it's presidential election, and there'll be other offices too, besides other local. So there'll be several different elections to campaign for. Thanks.
Thanks. I agree. I think that's a good point. So how do we allow it for something like something like that?
Yeah.
And not end up with.
So the Reed versus Gilbert, like Liz is the pro on this by now. She's read it 100 times, the case. So we have to be content neutral. However, my understanding now is it's been kind of going through the court system and talking with David Church. If you provide, because it was written basically for providing religious land uses a lot of freedom in freedom of speech. And so I can talk with them and see if, and politics, I know the politics is kind of the other one, but if we had kind of those 2 uses were provided more flexibility and more allowances than other uses, if we can regulate it from that standpoint. I talked with him about it before, and we just never really came to a conclusion on it. But it seems like, since that's why it was written, if a code provided more allowances for political signs and for religious land uses, could it be content in that from that standpoint? Or does that, if you do that, does that then raise the bar and all the commercial uses get to follow that same standard? So we can check on that, because that would be probably the best way to do it, if you could just call out political signs. But it's hard because we're told to be content neutral. You guys know what I'm talking about. So if we were able to do that, provide more flexibility to religious uses and to political type signs.
So that would be like keeping it at 2, but if it were political, it could go up to 5 or 6.
Yeah. And so if we loosened it for those types of uses, do we still have to follow the content rule of Reed versus Gilbert? I don't know.
You have to be able to provide a good reason is why you're treating political signs different from religious signs versus the number.
Right.
So that's where the law would kick in.
Okay.
Which we could. I don't even know how you would do it, actually.
I was just thinking if we could call maybe those 2, like we treat those 2 the same, because those are kind of the ones that where a lot of the. Well, then you do have just public speech in general.
I think you would do it by calling out yard signs, and then we call out
Yeah.
banner signs and different types of temporary signs, and then that's how you would do it.
That makes sense.
I think that's the way we would do it.
Yeah.
I would just like to say, though, as someone who was affected by what Dave is talking about, as a political candidate, it seemed really restrictive at first, but as a citizen driving through the different cities in our county and then coming into ours, it was delightful not to have everything plastered in political signs. And I felt like the signs that we did have were a lot more meaningful because there were so few of them. And when a person chose to put a sign in their yard, it meant something. So I actually was frustrated by our sign code and then kind of came around and realized that it actually has a lot of meaning sometimes when you do have to really think about what you're doing with your signs.
Yeah, I was gonna say I might be in the minority, but I think two's fine for political signs. Just pick your two favorites and.
A question is,
Yeah.
does a flag constitute a sign? Does putting something in your window that's inside your house constitute a sign? All that would be?
But
Yeah.
not a country flag, right?
But not,
Right, not the American
but
flag.
like something that had other content on it?
Mhm. Well, depend, like, commercial flags, like a car company or, BMW or something, that would be a commercial speech. On a residential, I guess it would just depend.
I mean, if someone had like 3 different sports teams flags or something, like would that? I'm just saying, like, basically, if you don't want a bunch of stuff in people's yards, then we shouldn't allow a bunch of stuff in people's yards. If we're okay with it, then we should allow it. but-
We do regulate flag poles. We only allow 3, I think, in residentials, and we do allow a maximum size of the flag, but we don't,
And the height of the pole.
yeah, that's all we can do.
I like the acres though. To get back to your question, I think it helps scale it nicely.
With the political signs, just to kind of point out, I mean, we went through, it was 7 candidates. I mean, there was a lot of campaigning going on, and we didn't, I mean, we received some complaints, but we act on a complaint basis, and so it's not going to be staff driving out, counting signs in people's yards. I mean, we do regulate our public streets though. Especially the main, and most candidates were really great about keeping their signs off of Main Street and Center Street. Maybe we had an issue here or there, but in general, it's something that's just on a complaint basis, and so we didn't. I don't know. Maybe Buchanan can speak to that, but I don't think we got a lot of calls about the number of signs in people's yards. I don't think we received anything for that. It was more.
We didn't receive any
right-of-way.
calls about the number of signs that were in people's yards. There were some signs that were on public property, which shouldn't have been there. But those were taken care of.
So, yeah, I guess, circling back to my original comment, I think I like this one, and I would lean more towards reducing the amount on small residential lots, personally.
Can I ask a question about the other zones? So as the change, as you have it written there, with that, because you mentioned the Forge and the villas or the other residential developers, as you've changed it here in your proposal, would that account for, like, allow what's already currently there? The way it's been changed?
Like for the villas, like would
Yeah,
this
and then-
allow?
And then the
yes.
Forge, you mentioned those.
Yeah, it
areas.
would. Well, maybe their signs might be too big, but since I think we'll probably put in there that they can transfer square footage between signs because they only have 2, and I believe that's the only amount they want, so they should be okay.
So that will allow what's there now?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't know how big their sign. They might be 128 square feet. I'm not entirely sure though.
What if you have multiple lots?
Like yard B.
You've already platted this stuff.
Yeah, so I thought about that today, and I was like, well, how would I do yard A versus yard B? Because you guys are doing yard A as one development, so that's how I would do yard A as one development. Yeah. Well, because you're subdivided, but you're developing it as one site. And then yard B, you're doing the complete opposite. You've subdivided it and you're doing each individual site. So I guess that's how I would determine it, is if it's one site being developed by one developer or multiple sites in a bigger development being developed individually.
So there's like 9 lots in yard B.
Yeah. And they're all over 2 acres, so you guys would get bigger signs. But so it would be per lot for yard B. Each lot would get this.
There's no way to consolidate that, say we have 8 continuous acres here, maybe they're a half acre and then 7 acres and then 2 acres, but we just want one giant sign for all, not giant, but one large sign for all of it.
For all of it.
What's a 600 square?
But I guess if that's what you wanted, then you could apply for it that way, and then that's how we could look at it. So, any other questions?
Was that clear feedback?
So I'll look at the number of signs for residential. Are you guys okay with the number of signs for the other zones? The 5, it's basically the same, it's the 5, and then you get additional. Do you like this, or do you get a number set of signs and then you get a max total square footage for all signs?
So like the 5 signs per acre, does that mean someone who's selling an acre lot could put like 5 for sale signs, basically?
Yeah, it's 6 square feet per sign.
Did you say was there a city or community you were modeling this after for here, this one?
This one is similar to Colorado Springs. This one is more similar. I think this was Lehigh or Salt Lake City. It was in one of their districts.
Can we do a field trip to Colorado Springs?
Sure.
Do we have any leftover budget for you? I mean, it's hard for me to visualize, if you go back to the number before, exactly. But, I mean, I think generally with what we're discussing as far as the intent is to allow large developments to have larger signs so that they can advertise their development. It's up there while they're developing the site. When they're done developing the site, those signs come down. All of the intent of it, I'm okay with. So if we feel like these are the numbers that help us be able to achieve that. I'm a visual person, so I thought.
Do you ever drive down, before we started enforcing signs, did you ever drive down Mill Road? With all the signs that they had? I mean, it was definitely more than 5, but I mean, that's what we're talking about. You'd have signs all over.
Yeah, I like this as long as it's clear what temporary is and they come down.
Okay.
Oh, so maybe what you're getting at is you allow less signs, but still the same amount of area,
Yeah, maybe.
right? Because again, the intent is these developers want big signs.
I mean, we don't have to focus on residential. We can keep exactly what we have now and just look at commercial and like multifamily areas.
But then there's still issues then with like the lakeshore.
Large neighborhood development
Yeah,
spaces.
'cause those are
Multifamily.
residential.
Well, we would, so, and this, I think some city does it, and they do it that way. They say residential districts, and then all other districts, including multifamily. But, no.
I'm a little concerned about the 5 on the acre, but
On,
that's the only one that really kind of worries me.
on residential or both?
Both.
Both.
Should we consider like street frontage, like 1 sign per 100 feet as well?
So
So the acre is like long.
Yeah,
The-
so-
the-
Right,
yeah, if
like,
it was
so-
like, if they had like 50 feet of street frontage and they had 5 signs in that 50 feet, then it would be pretty crowded.
Right.
we can
That makes sense.
limit by spacing signs too.
The challenge on that one, Bryce, might be like the town center where they don't have
Yeah.
street frontage yet.
The street frontage is a big challenge for the city. It is. I tried it today.
Well, I'm in favor of less number of signs and larger signs and spaced out.
You probably got an example.
I'm just gonna measure it out for us. So if we did it based off of your street frontage,
When they get to
so
count their
this
new street,
corner
they put
could
in-
have two, like
a
however
lot of
many
frontage
signs you
now.
said per, what's 462 feet? 500, so 1 sign for every 100 feet. So 500, so 5 signs on that and 4 on the other. That's 9 signs, depending on how many you would allow and the square footage. And then
Yeah, I
you-
would so
then
much
you-
rather just have that one big sign they have than a bunch of little signs.
Yeah.
I'm sure they would too.
We could update, so the code, another thought is, right now it says 5 small signs and 1 large sign. You could say or.
Yeah, we
if
could
they
say
want.
or. I mean,
Yeah.
it kind of does that. Yeah, it says and 1 sign, so you have 6 signs. We could say and or slash or you could do one big one, I guess.
Yeah, you could say 5 small signs or 1 sign of 32
Yeah.
feet, something like that.
Yeah. Okay. So, look at number of signs. You guys are good with acres then, right? Do you want me to even touch residential?
I think if we're looking at residential as the large developments of residential,
Multifamily?
right? Multifamily, or even if it's a single-family subdivision,
Yeah.
I think it was less interest in each house now, each individual single-family lot can now put up more signs.
Okay. Okay, I'll look into both of those. Anything else, guys? No?
I think this might be my 3rd or 4th time going through these codes.
Yeah, this will be your last one besides approving it, Christine.
Is it only our 3rd or 4th time?
No, I mean just the sign code alone. Like,
Yeah.
You'll just see the finished product.
I might just send it back. Just
Yeah.
be right.
Okay, thank you, you guys, thank you.
Okay, so that's it for the work session? Okay. Do you guys want to share member reports or?
Speech.
Oh, we're just gonna get rid of me. That's what
Speech.
this is. Farewell. Off you go.
I don't know if you guys knew, Christy just took a job in Russia, so we never see her again. Working Putin's administration.
I might have preferred that actually.
That was one of the things going around. Just 1 second.
That's one of the things going around. Well, our president was just impeached, if everyone didn't see that. Yeah, in Congress. Yeah.
So I wanted just to say a couple things from the kind of the staff side, and as we all know, Christy has been elected to the city council, and congratulations on that. Very grateful for the time that you've served on the planning commission. I know for myself and for the planning department, you've provided a lot of enthusiasm and energy that I think this city needed as we planned our developments and as we move forward. I wanted just to kind of highlight a few of the accomplishments of Christy. And I say this like she's going away. I mean, instead of the first and third, you're the second and fourth Wednesday, right?
I'm really curious. I don't know what you're gonna say.
I've got some good ones. I think Chris probably has a few of them too, if he wants to say them. But Town Center Code, were you at the very initial part of the Town Center Code?
So that's when I first started kind of peeking my.
Okay, that's where you started, right? Yeah. So the Town Center
I saw
Code
what
and
some of the other guys were doing. Was like, what's going on over there? What are they doing?
Town Center Code, the zoning ordinance rewrite that we did about 2.5 years ago. So these are things that she has been a part of and helped spearhead a lot of them. The sign code update, the Forge Code. She helped review 300,000 square feet of new flex office, which is pretty incredible itself. I believe right now we have 600,000 square feet of flex office. And so there's quite a bit going on. And you guys know this because you're in the weeds with it, but the rest of the city doesn't quite understand. We actually have quite a bit of commercial, but it's in a flex office format. It's not as beautiful. But the Dairy Queen, would you call that your number
one?
one?
Say that one.
Was that your?
That's the burr in my side.
That's the one she loves. Were you here with Maverick? Did you do the original Maverick?
I didn't do Maverick.
Okay, but the Maverick sign, right? The vineyard sign on the Maverick wall.
That's not there.
That's not there.
Yeah.
I know that you've brought it up. The Yard A and B, and so that includes several retail establishments, medical office buildings, and so we're starting to see that built out. So that's really great. The Utah Valley Home Builders Association, the golf club, which was part of Yard A, the general plan, and that's a really huge one. And I think it's cool that you've been able to go through code amendments and then able to see the general plan get adopted. That was really amazing. You helped out with the O'Reilly Auto Parts, right? I got to put them in there. Starbucks, American First Credit Union, Coconut Cove, Sunset View Park, Vineyard Grove Park. You've probably signed or been a part of the platting of a couple thousand residential lots. You've attended 1 million DRC meetings, planning commission meetings, and city council on a regular basis. You allowed us to use your home for storage during events. We thank you for that when the storm came through.
That's right. That was awesome.
Yeah, you didn't charge us rent, so we appreciate that. And then you saved a tree. I don't know if you guys realize, but Christy
Several trees.
Several trees and a tree house.
The treehouse was not what I was going for, but the
Treehouse. Anyway, I wanted to point out a few things that she's done. I've just been really impressed with all that you've done, and from a staff side, we're gonna be sorry to see you go, but on to bigger and better things, right? Well,
I don't know.
The
about
thing
that.
is, the planning commission, you have more. I mean, I don't know why you went to the city council, to be honest. You should have. You
questions I
have
ask
more
myself
control
daily.
over it. But thank you from the city side. I don't know if any other staff members or Tice want to say something, but you've been phenomenal on the planning commission. It's been awesome to work with you, and we look forward to working with you on the city council as well.
Thanks, Morgan.
So we do have a plaque for you to show our appreciation for you. And we're wondering, because this planning commission will change, if we can do a quick picture with you guys. Would that be all right?
Awesome.
Cool.
Yeah, Bryce is overdressed and here's showing us up.
Like, well, who is that guy? Thank you, Morgan. Oh, spelled my name right. That's awesome.
We can do it when we adjourn. Want to do that?
Yeah, let's do that.
You have any
Oh, I will. I'll use it to adjourn the meeting because I have. I will say, I went to a big training last Saturday all day for city council, and they did some extensive training on land use. And that was the one time I was just like, I'm just gonna look at Facebook because it was great. I knew everything that was going on. It only took me 4 years to learn it, so. I will be sad to leave Planning Commission. It's been awesome, and I think this is the cool club of the city, so we'll move on to the complaints and the problems, right? And yeah, do the best we can to keep everything moving forward. So thanks for all you guys do. I hope that we can work well together when I'm on council, because I think what you guys do here, what we have done, is really important. And the decisions you make in here and these codes and things really do set the foundation for everything that goes forward. And it's so exciting to be part of a city that we're building from scratch, essentially, although it takes a lot of work, that scratch, right? But and so I think it's the type of thing that, 20, 30, 40 years from now, if you don't live here and you drive through, or if you do still live here, it'll be really exciting to look back and drive through and see all the things that you were a part of during this foundation building. And I know it's been really, it's been a privilege for me to be a part of it. And I've made some mistakes and we'll make more, but, I think everyone here is doing the best they can and is here for the right reasons. So thank you. Thanks, everybody. Do we have any commissioner reports tonight? Anything to share?
You guys.
Any of you, from you guys, or
Yeah, if you guys have any commission.
Jeff's not doing anything sneaky, neither, like,
Hmm?
tell us about?
I'm not
I
doing
don't know,
anything
you're not-
sneaky, no.
Okay.
Nothing to disclose.
Okay.
From planning side, we've kind of covered it.
Yeah.
Engineering always has it.
Summer's kind of busy.
Only if you have questions.
Nope. Are we good?
The overpass
Anybody
will be
wants an
quiet.
update?
I have an economic development question. So, full disclosure, I work for Amazon, but, one was a distribution center or a sort center was just announced in American Fork. Maybe it's been in the works for a while, but what can we do to get more into, because honestly, like logistics, fulfillment, transportation hubs, those types of things, that's a big part of the economic future.
Yeah.
What can we do, being close to a freeway on-ramp, those types of things, to attract more of those and be in the loop and, take the company out of it. It could be any company, that.
Yeah.
So many things are online and delivery now that we've got to be a part of that from an economic development standpoint.
So Jake and I looked at the land use of the city and the square footage capacity in the flex office industrial area. With the build out, taking the build out of what's on 1750, it's about 53 acres of build out, and that translated to about 600,000 square feet. That's already built right now. And if you kind of overlaid that across the industrial districts that we have, it translated to roughly 4 to 5 million square feet. And so we're in a really good position to go after like a mega sites through the state. And we've talked with the state about potentially getting a designation as a mega site. Mega site meaning something really large, either like a huge factory or something like an Amazon or that would add a lot of jobs and that could provide a lot of value to the property up there. And so we've talked with EDC Utah about it. We've also met with UVU about designating 200 acres or so, maybe even up to 300 acres, as a like a business innovation site that's connected to UVU. So it wouldn't be owned by UVU, but it would. We would look at potentially working with the state on a special designation that would help to induce development that connected with programming of UVU. And so you'd have the campus, but then you'd have a major part of the city that closely collaborated, that would collaborate with UVU. So the research park at the University of Utah is a pretty good example of that. So we have some amazing opportunities. One, so some of the issues that we've dealt with is we get a lot of the RFPs through EDC Utah, and most of them are in manufacturing or industrial categories. And we've gone after those, but typically they want to come in right away. And as you know, we're in the process of cleaning up a major chunk of that land. So we do get calls on it. So there's a lot of interest. When the land is cleaned up and has a good bill of health, it's going to put us in a really nice position to go after those. But typically when they're doing the RFP, like we had the Amazon second headquarter RFP that we all responded to, and that would have been amazing. But typically they want to move forward really quickly on those types of projects. So I think it's 18 more months is the projected cleanup of that property, maybe a little bit less. So we're closing in on it, and that's going to open up hundreds of acres, and we'll be able to move forward with something like that.
Yeah, good to hear that it's on
Yeah.
the radar, because I mean, we've got a lot of other, industries, retail, things like that coming in, but, the logistics is going to be a huge part for.
Yeah, and we are doing good with just the flex office too. I mean, like I said, we're at 600,000 square feet. I think during Christie's tenure, we calculated it was about 300,000 of that square feet in the last 4 years has been approved and is either built or in the process of being built. So from the industrial standpoint, the city's we're doing really well on the north end. We're hoping as property cleans up that we can expand that development to the south.
I was wondering if there's any update, if we're still moving forward with the delineation of the wetlands.
Of the ones in Water's Edge and in the
Yeah.
Homestead area.
Yeah.
There's no current movement on any
Okay.
of that stuff right now.
Okay.
I mean, I think it's still, there is some things in the works, but it's kind of slowed down. Don's been taking care of that, and I'm not sure if he's made any progress with working out a contract or agreement with anybody to do that.
Okay, great. Well, if there's no other questions,
Actually,
on
on that note, yeah. Sorry, I just wanted to hurry and make sure that this is on your guys' radar. But I'm gearing up for a landscaping code revision. And so basically, this will be touching on public parks, public spaces, parking strips, parking islands, stormwater detention and retention basins. So just a lot of different things in the city that the city has to maintain to make these more water-wise and also wildlife friendly. Utah is the third driest state in the nation, but we're also the number 1 or number 2 water consumers, depending on which reports you look at. So it's something that we really need to be aware of. And something that we have a really cool opportunity for as we move forward and build our city from scratch, like you were saying. And so it's something that we really have the opportunity to be a standard for the rest of the West as we craft our city to integrate nature and also be aware of its purposes and how we can better benefit and help our pollinators, our birds, while still maintaining a water-wise approach to our landscaping. So that'll be a really great portion of the city in our downtown landscaping, so we won't have to retrofit. So if there's anything you guys want to add to that, or if there's anything you guys find interesting with that, please contact me, and I'd love to include you in that process.
Cool, very cool. Okay, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
All in favor?
I'll second it.
Oh, yeah, second it, yeah. I'm in favor, so all in favor?
Aye.
And I'm gonna use this gavel, because I've always wanted to.